Hey you guys, also Sean here again, and I'm here to do a cartoon headshot of 50 Cent. 50 Cent. So like, okay, yeah, cartoon picture, 50 Cent headshot. And listening to Alice in Wonderland audiobook, trying to get myself off into Thanksgiving and the Christmas holiday. Thanksgiving, Christmas. This blue, I'm looking for black to do the outline tracing. So I might want to use this brown. Okay, I found my black. This is a crazy art pencil, color pencil, black, and we're going to outline 50 Cent. Outline 50 Cent. So let's try to work on his eyebrows first. Don't have much of eyebrows, but let's make it look like it's much. Okay, so we got that down. Now let's do, he got this right here. Put that right there. Put that. Go around eye. Doing his eyes. Let's do his ears. He has very strong cheekbones. Of course, we all know about 50 Cent. So, I think I'm gonna do his hairline. So we get that down. So now we need to do the top of his head. Let's do this ear right here. So we're gonna do his lips now. Let's go and do the mustache.
for really I'm quite tired of being such a tiny little thing. It did so indeed.
Okay, so now we're going to do the outline of his
Before she
face.
had drunk half the bottle, she found her head pressing against the ceiling and had to stoop to save her neck from being broken. She hastily put down the bottle, saying to herself, "That's quite enough. I hope I shan't grow any more. As it is, I can't get out at the door."
Now we're going to do a little bit of his shoulders.
Alas, it was too late to wish that. She went on growing and very soon had to kneel down on the floor. In another minute, there was not even room for this, and she tried the effect of lying down with one elbow against the door and the other arm curled round her head. Still, she went on growing, and as a last resource, she put one arm out of the window.
Okay, so we got 50 Cent outline down.
Now I can do no more, whatever happens. What will become of me?
He had that on his forehead too.
Alice, the little magic bottle had now had its full
Now
effect,
what we
and she grew no larger. Still, it was very uncomfortable, and as there seemed
what we need to
no
do
sort
now
of chance of
is
her ever getting out of the room again, no
let's
wonder
work on
she
his
felt
skin
unhappy.
complexion. 50 Cent skin
It was much
complexion.
pleasanter at home, thought poor Alice, when
Okay,
one wasn't
so
always growing larger and smaller and being ordered about by mice and rabbits. I almost wish I hadn't gone down that rabbit hole, and yet, it's rather curious, you know, this sort of life. I do wonder what can have happened to me. When I used to
I think
read
I might try to
fairy
go
tales,
and
I
use
fancied
this
that kind of thing
brown
never
right
happened.
here.
And now here I am
This
in
is
the
my
middle
favorite
of one.
brown.
There ought to be a book written about me, that there ought. And when I grow up,
And I don't see how it works with the gold
When
one.
I'm grown up now, she added in a sorrowful tone, at least there's no room to grow up any more here. But then, thought Alice, shall I never get any older than I am now? That'll be a comfort in one way, never to be an old woman, but then always to have lessons to learn. Oh, I shouldn't like that. Oh, you foolish Alice, she answered herself. How can you learn lessons in here? Why, there's hardly room for you, and no room at all for any lesson books. And so she went on, taking
I don't think I
one
need
side
to
and
use
then the
this
other,
brown.
and
Oh no,
making
I'm gonna
quite
see.
a conversation of it
Let me
altogether.
see.
But after a few minutes, she heard a voice outside and stopped to listen. "Marianne, Marianne," said the voice, "fetch me my gloves this moment." Then came a little pattering of feet on the stairs. Alice knew it was the rabbit coming to look for her, and she trembled till she shook the house, quite forgetting that she was now about 1,000 times as large as the rabbit, and had no reason to be afraid of it.
I don't think I like this brown too much.
Presently the rabbit came up to the door and tried to open it, but as the door opened inwards, and Alice's elbow was pressed hard against it, that attempt
Let's try this brown right here.
Alice heard it say to itself, "Then I'll go round and get in at the window." That you won't, thought Alice, and after waiting till she fancied she heard the rabbit just under the window, she suddenly spread out her hand and made a snatch in the air. She did not get hold of anything, but she heard
I might go with this, either look pretty big. Now I'm gonna get this Premier Color black, and on the details, I'm gonna go around
Next came an angry voice.
the details.
Pat, where are you? And then a voice she had never heard before. "Sure, then I'm here, digging for apples, Your Honor." "Digging for apples, indeed," said the rabbit angrily. "Here, come and help me out of this." Sounds of more broken glass. "Now tell me, Pat, what's that in the window?" "Sure, it's an arm, Your Honor." He pronounced it arm. "An arm, you goose. Whoever saw one that size? Why, it fills the whole window." "Sure it does, Your Honor, but it's an arm for all that." "Well, it's got no business there at any rate. Go and take it away." There was a long silence after this, and Alice could only hear whispers now and then, such as, "Sure, I don't like it, Your Honor, at all. Do as I tell you, you coward." And at last she spread out her hand again and made another snatch in the air. This time there were 2 little shrieks and more sounds of broken glass. What a number of cucumber frames there must be, thought Alice. I wonder what they'll do next. As for pulling me out of the window, I only wish they could. I'm sure I don't want to stay in here any longer. She waited for some time without hearing anything more. At last came a rumble
So I
from
use
little
this to make
cartwheels
sure that it be
and the sound
detailed,
of
but
many voices all talking together.
be careful
She
when
made
you
out the
use the
words,
Premier Color
"Where's the
white
other ladder?"
because it
Well, I had
can
to bring my one.
smudge,
Bill's got
and
the
we
other.
trying
Bill,
to
did you hear that?
avoid
Here, put 'em up in this corner.
smudging.
No,
Okay,
tie 'em together first. They don't
trying
reach
to
out high
avoid it.
enough yet. Oh, they'll do well enough. Don't be particular. Here, Bill, catch hold of this rope. Will the roof bear? Mind that loose slate. Oh, it's coming down. Heads below. A loud crash. Now, who did that? It was Bill, I fancy. Who's to go down the chimney? Nay, I shan't. You do it. That I won't, then. Bill's to go down. Here, Bill. The master says you're to go down the chimney. Oh, so Bill's got to come down the chimney, has he? Said Alice to herself. Shy, they seem to put everything upon Bill. I wouldn't be in Bill's place for a good deal. This fireplace is narrow, to be sure, but I think I can kick a little. She drew her foot as far down the chimney as she could, and waited till she heard a little animal, she couldn't guess of what sort it was, scratching and scrambling about in the chimney close above her. Then, saying to herself, "This is Bill," she gave one sharp kick, and waited to see what would happen next.
Allison
First thing she
did
heard
that.
was a general chorus of, "There goes Bill." Then the rabbit's voice along, "Catch him, you by the hedge." Then silence. And then
Okay, so
another
I got the
confusion of
white down.
voices.
Hopefully I got it
All
down
of his head. Brandy now.
evenly, but you gotta be
Who
careful
was it,
because you don't
old
want to
fellow?
mess up on
What
the
happened to you?
details
Tell
neither.
us all
So
about it. Last came a little
now let's
feeble speaking
use
voice.
this
That's
very
Bill,
little
thought
gold.
Alice. Well, I hardly know. No more, thanky. I'm better now, but I'm a deal too flustered to tell you. All I know is something comes at me like a jack-in-the-box, and up I goes like a skyrocket. So you did, old fellow, said the others. We must burn the house down, said the rabbit's voice, and Alice called out as loud as she could, "If you do, I'll set Dinah at you." There was a dead silence instantly, and Alice thought to herself, I wonder what they will do next. If they had any sense, they'd take the roof off. After a minute or two, they began moving about again, and Alice heard the rabbit say, "A barrowful will do to begin with." A barrowful of what? Thought Alice, but she had not long to doubt, for the next moment a shower of little pebbles came rattling in at the window, and some of them hit her in the face. "I'll put a stop to this," she said to herself, and shouted out, "You'd better not do that again," which produced another dead silence. Alice noticed with some surprise that the pebbles were all turning into little cakes as they lay on the floor, and a bright idea came into her head. If I eat one of these cakes, she thought, it's sure to make some change
I
in
need
my
a shot
size,
in it.
and as it can't possibly make me larger, it must make me smaller, I suppose. So she swallowed one of the cakes, and was delighted to find that she began shrinking directly. As soon as she was small enough to get through the door, she ran out of the house, and found quite a crowd of little animals and birds waiting outside. The poor little lizard, Bill, was in the middle, being held up by 2 guinea pigs, who were giving it something out of a bottle. They all made a rush at Alice the moment she appeared, but she ran off as hard as she could, and soon found herself safe in a thick wood. "The first thing I've got to do," said Alice to herself, as she wandered about in the wood, "is to grow to my right size again, and the second thing is to find my way into that lovely garden. I think that will be the best plan." It sounded an excellent plan, no doubt, and very neatly and simply arranged. The only difficulty was that she had not the smallest idea how to set about it. And while she was peering about anxiously among the trees, a little sharp bark.
I can't hear you. Why are you talking so low? Hello? What is it? You can't introduce yourself.
No.
What do you want?
Mom said chicken with food.
Yeah, she told me she gonna have Angel check on me.
Oh.
Drawing.
over her head made her look up in a
My
great
sister
hurry.
feel like getting on my nerve.
An enormous puppy was looking down at her with large round eyes and feebly stretching out one paw, trying to touch her. Poor little thing, said Alice in a coaxing tone, and she tried hard to whistle to it, but she was terribly frightened all the time at the thought that it might be hungry, in which case it would be very likely to eat her up, in spite of all her coaxing. Hardly knowing what she did, she picked up a little bit of stick and held it out to the puppy, whereupon the puppy jumped into the air off all its feet at once with a yelp of delight and rushed at the stick and made believe to worry it. Then Alice dodged behind a great thistle to keep herself from being run over, and the moment she appeared on the other side, the puppy made another rush at the stick and tumbled head over heels in its hurry to get hold of it. Then Alice,
Be careful that you
it was very
don't
like
smudge the
having a game
picture.
of play with a cart horse, and expecting every moment to be trampled under its feet, ran round the thistle again. Then the puppy began a series of short charges at the stick, running a very little way forwards each time and a long way back, and barking hoarsely all the while, till at last it sat down a good way off, panting, with its tongue hanging out of its mouth and its great eyes half shut. This seemed to Alice a good opportunity for making her escape, so she set off at once and ran till she was quite tired and out of breath, and till the puppy's bark sounded quite faint in the distance. And yet what a dear little puppy it was, said Alice, as she leant against a buttercup to rest herself, and fanned herself with one of the leaves. I should have liked teaching it tricks very much, if I'd only been the right size to do it. Oh dear, I'd nearly forgotten that I've got to grow up again. Let me see. How is it to be managed? I suppose I ought to eat or drink something or other, but the great question is, what? The great question certainly was, what? Alice looked all round her at the flowers and
Okay,
blades
so
of
we got
grass,
the
but she did not
gold
see
down.
anything
Now let's
that
put
looked
down the
like
brown. The
thing
brown
to
needs to be
eat or
sharpened
drink
up.
under the circumstances. There was a large mushroom growing near her, about the same height as herself, and when she had looked under it, and on both sides of it, and behind it, it occurred to her that she might as well look and see what was on the top of it. She stretched herself up on tiptoe and peeped over the
And
edge
be
of the
careful and
mushroom,
go around the
and her
details
eyes
too.
immediately met those of a large caterpillar that was sitting on the top with its arms folded, quietly smoking a long hookah, and taking not the smallest notice of her or of anything else. End of chapter 4, read by Kara Schallenberg, March 2010, in San Diego, California. Chapter 5 of Alice's Adventures in Wonderland by Lewis Carroll. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Chapter 5. Advice from a Caterpillar. The caterpillar and Alice looked at each other for some time in silence. At last, the caterpillar took the hookah out of its mouth and addressed her in a languid, sleepy voice. "Who are you?" said the caterpillar. This was not an encouraging opening for a conversation. Alice replied rather shyly, I hardly know, sir, just at present. At least I know who I was when I got up this morning, but I think I must have been changed several times since then. What do you mean by that? Said the caterpillar sternly. Explain yourself. I can't explain myself, I'm afraid, sir, said Alice, because I'm not myself, you see. I don't see, said the caterpillar. I'm afraid I can't put it more clearly, Alice replied very politely, for I can't understand it myself to begin with, and being so many different sizes in a day is very confusing. It isn't, said the caterpillar. Well, perhaps you haven't found it so yet, said Alice, but when you have to turn into a chrysalis, you will someday, you know, and then after that into a butterfly, I should think you'll feel it a little queer, won't you? Not a bit, said the caterpillar.
Dropped it.
Well, perhaps your feelings may be different, said Alice. All I know is it would feel very queer to me. You, said the caterpillar contemptuously. Who are are you? Which brought them back again to the beginning of the conversation. Alice felt a little irritated at the caterpillars making such very short remarks, and she drew herself up and said very gravely, I think you ought to tell me who you are first. Why? Said the caterpillar. Here was another puzzling question, and as Alice could not think of any good reason, and as the caterpillar seemed to be in a very unpleasant state of mind, she turned away. Come back, the caterpillar called after her. I have something important to say. This sounded promising, certainly. Alice turned and came back. Keep your temper, said the caterpillar. Is that all?
Get
said
smart
Alice,
with her.
swallowing down her anger as well as she could. No, said the caterpillar. Alice thought she might as well wait until she had nothing else to do, and perhaps For some minutes it puffed away without speaking,
My
but at
mom
last
something
it
to eat.
unfolded its arms, took the hookah out of its mouth again, and said, So you think you're changed, do you? I'm afraid I am, sir, said Alice. I can't remember things as I used, and I don't keep the same size for 10 minutes together. Can't remember what things, said the caterpillar. Well, I've tried to say, how doth the little busy bee, but it all came different, Alice replied in a very melancholy voice. Repeat, you are old, Father William, said the caterpillar. And yet you incessantly stand on your head. Do you think at your age it is right? In my youth, Father William replied to his son, I feared it might injure the brain. But now that I'm perfectly sure I have none, why, I do it again and again. You are old, said the youth, as I mentioned before, and have grown most uncommonly fat. Yet you turned a back somersault in at the door. Pray, what is the reason of that? In my youth, said the sage, as he shook his grey locks, I kept all my limbs very supple by the use of this ointment, 1 shilling the box. Allow me to tell you a couple. You are old, said the youth, and your jaws are too weak for anything tougher than suet. Yet you finished the goose, with the bones and the beak. Pray, how did you manage to do it? In my youth, said his father, I took to the law, and argued each case with my wife, and the muscular strength which it gave to my jaw has lasted the rest of my life. You are old, said the youth. One would hardly suppose that your eye was as steady as ever, yet you balanced an eel on the end of your nose. What made you so awfully clever? I have answered 3 questions, and that is enough, said his father. Don't give yourself airs. Do you think I can listen all day to such stuff? Be off, or I'll kick you downstairs. That is not said right, said the caterpillar. Not quite right, I'm afraid, said Alice timidly. Some of the words have got altered. It is wrong from beginning to end, said the caterpillar decidedly. And there was silence for some minutes. The caterpillar was the first to speak. What size do you want to be? It asked. Oh, I'm not particular as to size, Alice hastily replied. Only one doesn't like changing so often, you know. I don't know, said the caterpillar. Alice said nothing. She had never been so much contradicted in her life before, and she felt that she was losing her temper. Are you content now? Said the caterpillar. Well, I should like to be a little larger, sir, if you wouldn't mind, said Alice. 3 inches is such a wretched height to be. It is a very good height indeed, said the caterpillar angrily, rearing itself upright as it spoke. It was exactly 3 inches high. But I'm not used to it, pleaded poor Alice in a piteous tone, and she thought to herself, I wish the creatures wouldn't be so easily offended. You'll get used to it in time, said the caterpillar, and it put the hookah into its mouth and began smoking again. This time Alice waited patiently until it chose to speak again. In a minute or 2, the caterpillar took the hookah out of its mouth and yawned once or twice and shook itself. Then it got down off left the mushroom and crawled away in the grass, merely remarking as it went, "One side will make you grow taller, and the other side will make you grow shorter." "One side of what? The other side of what?" thought Alice to herself. "Of the mushroom," said the caterpillar, just as if she had asked it aloud, and in another moment it was out of sight.
Okay, so we
Alice
finally got the
remained
skin
looking
complexion
thoughtfully at the
down,
mushroom
but
for a minute,
what we
trying to
need
make
the
out which were the two
Crayola
sides of it.
Crazy
And as it
Art
was
White
perfectly round, she found the
to
tip
help
of it
bring out the
almost.
details and to smooth
However, at
everything
last she
out.
stretched her arms round it as far as they would go, and broke off a bit of the edge with each hand. "And now, which is which?" she said to herself, and nibbled a little of the right hand bit to try the effect. The next moment she felt a violent blow underneath her chin. It had struck her foot. She was a good deal frightened by this very sudden change, but she felt that there was no time to be lost, as she was shrinking rapidly, so she set to work at once to eat some of the other bit. Her chin was pressed so closely against her foot
Now,
that it was
if I
unable to
had
open her mouth,
a
but she
lot
did it
more
at
of this
last and
pencil,
managed to swallow a
I
morsel.
will go over it several times till it had
"My
become
head's free at
completely
last,"
smoothed
said
out.
Alice in a tone of
But
delight,
because I had
which changed
so
into
little
alarm in another
amount,
moment,
I
when she
only
found
could
that
go
her
over it like a
shoulders were
couple
nowhere
of,
to be found.
maybe 1-2
All she could
times.
see when she looked down was an immense length of neck, which seemed to rise like a stalk out of the sea of green leaves that lay far below her. "What can all that green stuff be?" said Alice. "And where have my shoulders got to? And oh, my poor hands, how is it I can't see you?" She was moving them about as she spoke, but no result seemed to follow, except a little shaking among the distant green leaves. As there seemed to be no chance of getting her hands up to her head, she tried to get her head down to them, and was delighted to find that her neck would bend about easily in any direction like a serpent. She had just succeeded in curving it down into a graceful zigzag, and was going to dive in among the leaves, which she found to be nothing but the tops of the trees under which she had been wandering, when a sharp hiss made her draw back in a hurry. A large pigeon had flown into her face, and was beating her violently with its wings. "Serpent!" screamed the pigeon. "I'm not a serpent," said Alice indignantly. "Let me alone." "Serpent, I say again," repeated the pigeon, but in a more subdued tone, and added with a kind of sob, "I've tried every way, and nothing seems to suit them." "I haven't the least idea what you're talking about," said Alice. "I've tried the roots of trees, and I've tried banks, and I've tried hedges," the pigeon went on, without attending to her. "But those serpents, there's no pleasing them." Alice was more and more puzzled, but she thought there was no use in saying anything more till the pigeon had finished. "As if it wasn't trouble enough hatching the eggs," said the pigeon, "but I must be on the lookout for serpents night and day. Why, I haven't had a wink of sleep these 3 weeks." "I'm very sorry you've been annoyed," said Alice, who was beginning to see its meaning. "And just as I'd taken the highest tree in the wood," continued the pigeon, raising its voice to a shriek, "and just as I was thinking I should be free of them at last, they must needs come wriggling down from the sky. A serpent."
It's a lot of work, I'm not gonna
"I'm not
lie.
a serpent, I tell you," said Alice. I'm a... "Well, what are you?" said the pigeon. "I can see you're trying to invent something." "I'm a little girl," said Alice, rather doubtfully, as she remembered the number of changes she had gone through that day. "A
Okay,
likely story indeed,"
we
said the
finished with
pigeon
that.
in a tone of the deepest contempt.
Let's
"I've
go
seen a
and
good many
work
little
on his
girls in my
hair.
time, but never one with such a neck
As you
as
know, we're
that.
gonna use the black
No,
for his
you're
hair
a
because his hair is
serpent,
black.
and there's no use denying it. I suppose you'll be telling me next that you never tasted an egg." "I have tasted eggs, certainly," said Alice, who was a very truthful child. "But little girls eat eggs quite as much as serpents do, you know." "I don't believe it," said the pigeon. "But if they do, why then they're a kind of serpent. That's all I can say." This was such a new idea to Alice that she was quite silent for a minute or two, which gave the pigeon the opportunity of adding, "You're looking for eggs, I know that well enough, and what does it matter to me whether you're a little girl or a serpent?" "It matters a good deal to me," said Alice hastily, "but I'm not for eggs as it happens, and if I was, I shouldn't want yours. I don't like them raw." "Well, be off then," said the pigeon in a sulky tone, as it settled down again into its nest. Alice crouched down among the trees as well as she could, for her neck kept getting entangled among the branches, and every now and then she had to stop and untwist it. After a while she remembered that she still held the pieces of mushroom in her hands, and she set to work very carefully, nibbling first at one and then at the other, and growing sometimes taller and sometimes short, until she had succeeded in bringing herself down to her usual height. It was so long since she had been anything near the right size that it felt quite strange at first.
Then take a
But she
break.
got used to it in a few minutes and began talking to herself as usual. "Come, there's half my plan done now. How puzzling
Okay,
all these
get back
changes
to
are.
work.
I'm never sure what I'm going to be from one minute to another. However, I've got back to my right size. The next thing is to get into that beautiful garden. How is that to be done, I wonder?" As she said this, she came suddenly upon an open place, with a little house in it about 4 feet high. "Whoever lives there," thought Alice, "it'll never do to come upon them this size. Why, I should frighten them out of their wits." So she began nibbling at the right-hand bit again, and did not venture to go near the house till she had brought herself down to 9 inches high. End of chapter 5. Read by Kara Schallenberg, March 2010, in San Diego, California. Chapter 6 of Alice's Adventures in Wonderland by Lewis Carroll. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Chapter 6. Pig and Pepper. For a minute or two she stood looking at
Alright, we
house,
finally got the
wondering
hairline
what to do
down.
next, when suddenly a footman in livery came running out of the wood. She considered him to be a footman because he was in livery. Otherwise, judging by his face only, she would have called
So
him
we're
a
gonna
fish.
do his
And rapped loudly at the
he had
door
a
with
white
his
shirt
knuckles.
on. So we're gonna do his jacket.
It
I
was
think I
opened by
might need to
another
outline
footman
his
in livery,
jacket
with a
again
round face
with
and
this so
large
it could,
eyes
you
like a
know.
frog. And both footmen, Alice noticed, had powdered hair that curled all over their heads. She felt very curious to know what it was all about, and crept a little way out of the wood to listen. The fish footman began by producing from under his arm a great letter, nearly as large as himself, and this he handed over to the other, saying
Okay,
in a solemn
so
tone,
he had on
"For
like
the
a
Duchess,
look like a
an
black gray
invitation from
jacket,
the Queen
but
to play
I'm just
croquet."
gonna put gray in it.
The frog footman repeated, in the same solemn tone, only changing the order of the words a little. "From the Queen, an invitation for the Duchess to play croquet." Then they both bowed low, and their curls got entangled together. Alice laughed so much at this that she had to run back into the wood for fear of their hearing her, and when she next peeped out, the fish footman was gone, and the other was sitting on the ground near the door, staring stupidly up into the sky. Alice went timidly up to the door and knocked. "There's no sort of use in knocking," said the footman, "and that for 2 reasons. First, because I'm on the same side of the door as you are. Secondly, because they're making such a noise inside, no one could possibly hear you." And certainly there was a most extraordinary noise going on within. A constant howling and sneezing, and every now and then a great crash, as if a dish or kettle had been broken to pieces. "Please then," said Alice, "how am I to get in?" "There might be some sense in your knocking," the footman went on without attending to her.
Okay, so we got that down. It's not like a black gray, but it is gray. You know, you want to add like a black, you can add like black to it, or you can add gray, or you can add both. You know, it's however you want. Because it is a cartoon, it's a headshot. Now let's work on his lips. I always use peach.
But at any rate, he might answer
This is
questions.
the The
How
premier
am I
color
to get
peach.
in? She repeated
I always
aloud.
use peach on the lips
I shall sit
first.
here, the footman remarked,
Peach
till
go first.
tomorrow. At this moment, the door of the house opened, and a large plate came skimming out, straight at the footman's head. It just grazed his nose and broke to pieces against one of the trees behind him.
I always use peach.
Or next day, maybe, the footman continued in the same tone, exactly as if nothing had happened. How am I to get in? Asked Alice again, in a louder tone.
And let's get some of this
Are you to get in at all?
brown.
Said the footman. That's
Let's
the first
lightly
question,
go over
no.
it, lightly,
It was, no doubt. Only Alice did not
until
like
you
to be
build
told
it
so.
up.
It's really dreadful, she muttered to herself. The way all the creatures argue. It's enough to drive one crazy. The footman seemed to think this a good opportunity for repeating his remark with variations. I shall sit here, he said, on and off, for days and days. But what am I to do? Said Alice. Anything you like, said the footman, and began
I don't
whistling.
think this is going
There's
to
no
do.
use in talking to him, said Alice
So
desperately.
let's try
He's
another
perfectly
one.
idiotic.
Let's try the
And she
crazy
opened the
art
door and
brown.
went in. The door led right into a large kitchen, which was full of smoke from one end to the other. The Duchess was sitting on a three-legged stool in the middle, nursing a baby. The cook was leaning over the fire, stirring a large cauldron, which seemed to be full of soup. There's certainly too much pepper in that soup, Alice said to herself, as well as she could for sneezing. There was certainly too much of it in the air. Even the Duchess sneezed occasionally, and as for the baby, it was sneezing and howling alternately, without a moment's pause. The only things in the kitchen that did not sneeze were the cook and a large cat, which was sitting on the hearth and grinning from ear to ear. Please, would you tell me, said Alice, a little timidly, for she was not quite sure whether it was good manners for her to speak first, why your cat grins like that? It's a Cheshire cat, said the Duchess, and that's why, Pig. She said the
Okay,
last
so we
word
got
with such sudden
this
violence
thing don't want to
that
hold
Alice
up on
quite
me.
jumped, but she saw in another moment that it was addressed to the baby and not to her. So she took courage and
Shut.
I didn't know that Cheshire cats always grin.
I keep all my art stuff back
No,
here.
the cats could grin.
All my
They all
art
can,
stuff.
said the Duchess, and most of them do.
I keep it in
I don't know
a
any
noodle
that do,
box. The rest of my
said
art
Caroline,
stuff.
feeling quite pleased.
And
Got into a
I keep my
conversation.
art pencils behind
You
here.
don't know much, said the Duchess, and that's a fact.
And I just found out what was
Alice
wrong
did
with
not
it.
at all like
My
the tone of
ruler.
this remark,
It was the
and thought it
problem.
would be as well to introduce some other subject of
I need
conversation.
to move all
Now
my
she was trying
art
to fix
stuff
up
somewhere
one.
else
Took the
other than
cauldron of soup
behind
off
here,
the
but
fire, and at once set to work throwing everything within her reach at the
that was
Duchess
pretty
and Pig.
funny.
The fire irons came first,
So
then followed a shower of saucepans, plates, and dishes.
it's like,
Duchess took
man,
no
let
notice
me
of
be
them even when
seen.
they
I want to
hurt.
be
The
shown.
baby was howling so much
I'm
already
gonna
that it
move
was
all my
quite
art
impossible
stuff
to say
though,
whether the blows hurt it or not.
and make
Oh,
sure I
please
get rid
mind
of
what
that
you're
ruler.
doing,
Did I
cried
move that
Alice,
ruler?
jumping up and
That
down
ruler
in
was the
an
problem. I ain't
agony
know
of
what.
terror. Oh, there goes his precious
But I'm gonna
nose.
write down
As an
50-cent
unusually
name.
large saucepan flew close by it, and
What
very
color
nearly
is
carried
this
it
right
off.
here?
If everybody minded their own business, the Duchess said
I'm
in
gonna
a
write
hoarse growl,
50-cent name
the
on
world
top.
would go round a
50
deal
Cent
faster than it
come
does.
from South Jamaica,
Which
New
would
York.
not be an advantage,
I
said
think he's
Alice,
45
who felt very
years
glad to
old.
get an
Make sure I know
opportunity of
that.
showing off a little
Okay.
of her knowledge.
I'll move all my
Just
art
think of what work you
stuff.
would make with the day and night. You see, the
Yeah,
Earth takes 24
I'll
hours to
move
turn
it.
around
But
on its
I
axis.
think he's 45 years
Plenty
old.
of axes, said the
I
Duchess.
think.
Chop off her head.
Oh,
Alice glanced rather anxiously at the
I
cook
think
to
life is
see if she
doing
meant
him a
to
lot
say
more
it.
better,
But
and
the
not
cook
for
was
sure.
busy stirring the soup and seemed not to be listening. So she went on again. 24 hours, I think. Or is it 12?
The bankruptcy thing
Oh,
went
don't
towards his
bother me,
favor,
said the Duchess. And with
and
that, she began nursing her
I
child
think his
again,
name
singing
is
a sort of lullaby
Curtis
to it as she did
James
so,
Jackson
and
the
giving it a
third.
violent shake at the end of
It's
every
been a
word.
long time, so I really don't know.
Speak roughly to your little boy and beat him when he
But
sneezes.
I
He
do
only does
this
it to
one I do
annoy
know.
because he knows it teases.
Jesus trying to tell me to move all my art stuff from behind here and move it somewhere else. That's a,
Wow.
it's so
Well, that
funny.
just sang the
Everything
second verse of
and
the
still
song.
don't want to
He
sit
kept
up
tossing the
neither.
baby violently up and down, and the poor little thing
I
howled
think
so
it's trying to
that
come
Alice
loose.
could hardly hear
This
the
is one of those
words.
things you gotta put together
I speak
yourself.
severely to my boy. I beat him
I've been
when he
having this
sneezes.
for a while
He
now.
can
My sister
thoroughly
actually
enjoy a
bought me
pepper when
this.
he pleases.
I appreciate her, you know, because
Chorus.
she know what I like to do.
Wow.
It's a
Here,
miracle,
you may
and
use it a bit,
I,
Alec,
you know,
Alice
despite
said to Alice,
Alice in
flinging
Wonderland
the
book
baby
is
out as she
crazy,
spoke.
despite how crazy
I
it
must go
is,
and get ready
it's
to
a
play
good
croquet
book.
with
It
Lou.
helped me get through this with
And she
50
hurried out
Cent.
of the room. The cook threw
And
a
I
frying
just feel
pan after
the
her as she went
Christmas,
out,
but not just
but it just
Christmas. I
missed
feel
her.
the Thanksgiving spirit.
Alice
It's
caught
great,
the
you
baby
know,
with
it's
some
great.
difficulty, as it was a queer-shaped little creature, and held out its arms and legs in all directions.